All right, there it is. 7 o'clock has now come around, so we will get started here. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time to the Financial Aid Atlas series with myself, Zach Sawyer, Assistant Director of Admissions here at Maine Maritime, and our Director of Financial Aid, Ryan French, everybody's favorite financial aid director. We are excited to have you guys back for the next installment here tonight. Last time we covered untangling your finances, which was a little bit of an overview of financial need and understanding cost of attendance of school. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the next step, which is our institutional aid system and the Financial Aid Student Portal in an episode we're calling Unlocking the Campus Treasure Chest. As always, this will be a recorded session, so if you miss anything tonight, you'll be able to jump in and take a look at the recorded session. I'll be throwing up some helpful links into the chat function tonight. If you do have any questions throughout the evening that you'd like Ryan or myself to address, please use the Q&A. Finally, I can access that, which is really nice. So we're excited to have me on there. So without any further ado, will pass it off to Ryan, and he can get started jumping into tonight's episode.
Well, thank you very much, Zach, and thank you everybody for being here. We really appreciate you joining in and being a part of the webinar series. If this is your first time, welcome, and if you've been here previously, then definitely welcome back. Thank you. I could tell that when Zach was reading off the title of this episode, he was trying to hold back a smirk. We kind of went with a nautical theme. We are a maritime academy after all, so I went with a treasure chest naming convention. So hopefully you won't hold that against me as we move forward. But yeah, we're talking about unlocking the campus treasure chest. So there are funds that are going to be out there and available to students from a bunch of different sources. We've talked about financial aid in previous episodes, and you may have a grasp and understanding of what that means, but you can get funds, loan funds, scholarships, grants, all kinds of stuff from a variety of sources, including the federal government, state organizations, private organizations, and also from the school itself. So I just wanted to talk tonight about what those types of aid are, what you may or may not be able to expect in the whole process, and then how you access some of that stuff, what the eligibility requirements are, if there are applications involved, we're going to talk about those. And then we're going to talk a bit about our student portal as well, financial aid student portal that students, deposited students get access to. I wanted to start off right off the bat talking about the FAFSA, only because the FAFSA is one of the things that that application is required for continuing a lot of the institutional awards that you may be able to get. So a student does have to complete the FAFSA to be considered for some of our institutional aid. And it's going through some changes. So we talked about that a little bit in the last couple episodes, and I just wanted to give you guys an update. So right off the bat, FAFSA update, it's still delayed. It has not opened yet. So if you're feeling like you're behind the ball right now because I think I need to get the FAFSA done, you don't. It's not open yet. So right now they're thinking the most recent federal update says they promise that it'll be open in December. We don't have anything more firm than that. So I've sort of been communicating to people by December 31st. The hope is that the application will be open. I did want to mention, some of the repercussions of that delay are going to also be delayed processing of some of the information that gets sent to the school from your FAFSA. And that's going to be, every school out there is going to have a bit of a delay. For students who are showing up first time and families first time doing the FAFSA, you may not really see any big delay or issues, but if you're used to completing the FAFSA in October, finding out what federal aid you might get, beginning of November, obviously this is a bit of a delay. It's gonna just be a little bit different processing for us this year. But suffice to say, so hopefully by December 31st, it'll be open. The FAFSA data won't start rolling into the schools until January, so we might not have those first first looks at student aid until, end of January, beginning of February, just to give you guys a realistic view of what it's going to look like. I did put a couple stats in there, or a couple little piece of information. 40% more. That's the stat that we were given. The whole purpose for this delay is they want to they want to make it simpler. So hopefully the FAFSA application is going to be simpler for you folks, and you can find out some more information about what that looks like and why that is at the studentaid.gov website where you complete the FAFSA. And Zach put a link in the chat if you want to take a look at that. But also they're trying to increase accessibility. And so the idea is they're hoping that about 40% more students will have access to federal grant money, which is kind of a big deal. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to work a little bit more, have a little bit more access for our students as well. And we're going to talk about like all the federal aid and what that looks like in a lot more detail in future episodes. We're not really going to go over that tonight. There was a brief overview in our first episode, so feel free to take a look at that. But next episode on December 20th, we're going to start diving into the FAFSA. It's going to mostly be about what we expect the application to look like. So I'll have a little information on that, and we'll also be looking at what kind of information we're going to get from that, and what kind of information you need to expect to include when you complete that application. And that whole episode is going to be on the 20th. So that's our next webinar episode. I wanted to make sure you guys were ready for that. So moving on to institutional aid, there are a few types of aid that we offer here at Maine Maritime Academy. We're going to go into some detail, but broad categories, scholarships, loans, and then there are waivers and discounts that I wanted to briefly mention. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on what scholarships are available, but very basically, we have merit scholarships. Those are awarded by our admissions team. Some of you may have already been awarded merit scholarships. If you've applied and been accepted, you would have gotten communication from the admissions department about a merit award. Endowed scholarships and pass-through scholarships. Those are two types of scholarships that get awarded by me and the financial aid office. And typically those are going to be awarded, honestly, once that FAFSA information is in, and there is an application process for that as well. So I'll give you more information on that. There are institutional loans available. So I wanted to briefly mention that. We're going to do we're going to do 2 whole episodes just on loans, and kind of go into more detail on institutional loans in that episode. But we do have an institutional loan program here at Maine Maritime Academy that we typically kind of hold back and use very strategically for students who, borrowing is going to be part of their financial aid experience here at Maine Maritime Academy, and they maybe aren't getting great rates, or they've been denied for loans privately. So we do have some funds that we can help out with. But like I said, we'll go into more detail on that. That's not really what we're talking about today necessarily. And then I did want to take a moment to talk about waivers and discounts, because it comes up quite a bit. We've had questions in the last couple episodes, and Zach and I did a webinar series last year, which is available online right now. If you wanted to check that, it's a lot of the same information. Some of it's a little outdated, but we also got a lot of questions about some of those programs last year as well. So there's a ton of stuff on our website, and Zach put another link in the chat that goes straight to some of the financial aid stuff that's on our website that you can take a look at. There are some waiver and discount programs out there. They have very, very specific eligibility requirements. So I don't want to give you the impression that, everybody is going to qualify or be eligible for some of these programs. But I'm going to list out a few scenarios, and if, some of those scenarios resonate with you or sound like something you may be eligible for, definitely, take a look and do some more research and reach out to me if you have more questions about them. But specifically for Maine students, so students from the state of Maine attending Maine Maritime Academy, there are 2 state programs. One is a foster care tuition waiver. So if you are a student who has ever been in the foster care system, you will be able to apply and should have access to um, a, a grant program through the state that waives some tuition costs. And there is information on our website. There's information through the Finance Authority of Maine, which is the Maine state sort of aid and lending and college prep website. That's a really good organization, good program to take a look at. But they have more information about that there. And then we also have a tuition waiver program for Native American students from the state of Maine who have membership in Native American tribes here in Maine. So information about both of those programs is on the website. So definitely take a look at those if you fall into any of those categories. The other big one that we see is related to military service. So students who have served in the military and are coming to Maine Maritime Academy will have access typically to the GI Bill. And if you have GI Bill access, then you will get in-state tuition. So if you're an out-of-state student and you're attending Maine Maritime Academy and you are a military veteran with GI Bill benefits, you will qualify for the in-state tuition rate. So that's a discount in tuition for that specific type of student. There's also, if you are a student whose parent was a military veteran who has transferable GI benefits, meaning your parent served or your guardian, parent or guardian served and has the GI Bill, got the GI Bill for their service and has it available to transfer, meaning they still have transferable eligibility and they can transfer it to the student. The student can be eligible for in-state tuition. There's a whole process for verifying some of that information, but if you or your parent has military service history, please feel free to reach out and we'll try and direct you towards those resources. And like I said, there's more information on the website as well. And there are some other service-related waiver and discount programs that are laid out on the website. So take a look at that, get some information. Feel free to reach out if you have questions. I also wanted to briefly touch on some of the, they're called student incentive programs that are out there for some service commitments. So a lot of service-related stuff, not necessarily military service in this case, but there are incentive programs related to commitments to the National Guard, commitments to the Navy ROTC, commitments to, in some cases, the Coast Guard Auxiliary Program. So there are some sources of financial incentive for making commitments like that. If you want more information about those programs, you can definitely take a look on the website or reach out, and I'm happy to direct you towards those resources. And Zach, I'm sure can be a resource there as well to sort of push you towards the right people on campus that can talk to you about a lot of those programs. We're going to move on. I don't really work specifically with a lot of those incentive programs. So if you are interested in what the ROTC has to offer, we have someone on campus who is associated with the ROTC. If you are interested in maybe joining the National Guard, we do have someone on campus who can talk to you about those programs as well. And if you have military service, either yourself or a guardian or parent, we do have a certifying official on campus who can speak more about what those benefits would look like, how you get that process started. So we can direct you towards a lot of those resources if you have questions about any of that stuff. So moving on, I want to dive a little deeper into scholarships. So institutional scholarships come in two. I'm going to call them two major categories, but I have three listed out here. There are merit scholarships, and then there's endowed scholarships. If you see in the bottom left-hand corner there, I also briefly mentioned pass-through scholarships. Those kind of fit into a endowment scenario. A lot of the way those get awarded is the same, so I'm just going to kind of lump them together. But I want to start with the merit scholarship program. I've talked briefly about a lot of this stuff in a previous episode, but if this is your first time, like I said earlier, our admissions team does make determinations on merit awards for admitted students who, have applied and been admitted. They automatically get assessed for merit scholarships based on a few factors. They're going to look at your high school GPA. They're going to look at your academic major, and they're going to look at your state of residency. And depending on those three pieces of information, they're going to determine how much you may or may not be eligible for in a merit scholarship. The merit scholarship program is one that, again, it is really based on merit. So they don't, necessarily care if you have any additional or don't have any financial need, or have financial need as determined by the FAFSA, which again, we talked a little bit about cost of attendance and need in the last episode, and I'm going to do a little brief refresh on it in a couple slides. But it's a merit-based award, so they're not really looking at that information. But one of the requirements that is actually getting put into place for this upcoming academic year is that to maintain those scholarships, you do have to complete the FAFSA each year. We did have a question last episode about international students that came up. If you're an international student, you are not eligible to complete the FAFSA. If you're not a U.S. citizen, you can be an international student with dual citizenship and complete the FAFSA. But if you are not a U.S. citizen, you may not be eligible to complete the FAFSA, and you would still be allowed to maintain your merit scholarship. So I just want to say that right off the bat. But most students are going to be required to complete that application in order to maintain their merit scholarships year over year. Not for any of the specific data that's coming in on the FAFSA, just as sort of an application, a point of application to say that you have done this step in that aid process. It is also a requirement to be considered for endowed scholarships, although we do have an additional application for our additional institutional aid. So endowments are funds that have been donated to the school, usually by alumni, sometimes private organizations, or friends of the campus will put together an endowment. They'll give us a donation. Sometimes those endowments go towards building a new engineering education facility, or putting putting the ship simulator on campus. Those are sometimes through endowments, but the endowments that I'm working with are ones that have been donated to the school specifically for student scholarships. And those tend to get restrictions placed on them. We do have plenty of scholarships that don't have restrictions. So I'm going to talk about some of those restrictions, and just know that if you don't fall into any of those specific categories, you are still eligible for institutional scholarships. But the three biggest categories that scholarships do tend to get restricted by are your state of residency, your academic major, and whether or not you have financial need. So when you look at our endowed scholarships, just the way that they have been restricted over time, we're seeing that your students from the state of Maine who are in one of our unlimited license majors, which are the marine engineering operations, marine engineering transportation, marine engineering technology. Zach's giving me a look. I always do this. Marine transportation operations, and then marine systems engineering, the 5-year program. So those 4 degrees do tend to get more of those scholarship dollars, because a lot of our alumni have graduated out of those programs, and they look to donate back into those academic programs in the form of scholarships. And then there are a number of our scholarships that are restricted by need, meaning not only do you have to do the FAFSA, but with the calculation that's done, you have to have some amount of quote unquote financial need, like we calculated in our last webinar episode. if you have questions about how all of that works, I'm happy to, go into, more detail. And we're going to talk about some of that stuff in future episodes as well. But um, very basically, there are scholarships out there for everybody. Anybody who's applying, as long as you can complete that endowed scholarship application, which Zach put a link on, put a link in the chat to that. It's also on our website. I'm going to talk about our financial aid portal in a little bit. It's on there as well. So there's a lot of places to find that. We also will email links out to students, as part of our regular communication with accepted, deposited, and enrolled students. So there'll be lots of opportunities to look at that application, and I definitely encourage you to complete it and fill it out. We do have what we call a priority deadline, which is typically January 31st each year to complete that endowed scholarship application. We maintained that priority deadline, but if you don't complete the application by then, please still fill it out and send it in. I've got students who are filling it out right now for the academic year that we're currently in. And there are still opportunities for scholarships right now. So don't feel like if you miss that deadline that you shouldn't complete it anytime that you can do it. But earlier the better, because I have access to more funds the earlier you complete that form. I did want to briefly touch on pass-through scholarships as well. Pass-throughs are a little different than endowments because I can't always guarantee when they'll show up, which is both that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because when we go through the year, it's possible that we might get a donation from from an alumni, or we'll get a donation from a private organization, and boom, all of a sudden I have extra money to award to a student or multiple students. So that can be really exciting, but it's also difficult because it's hard to count on. So I don't typically include pass-through scholarships as part of our initial awarding when we're looking at students, but it does wind up being some money that we have a little wiggle room with as we get closer and into the academic year. If there are shortfalls anywhere for students or families, we can sometimes fill in with some of those funds. If you have any questions about any of the institutional scholarships that we've gone over, you feel free to put a question out in the Q&A, and we can definitely tackle some of those questions. I'm happy to jump into that, and there'll be a moment sort of at the end for a bunch of questions. So feel free to save your questions and put them in, or drop them in whenever you want. So moving on, I mentioned it a couple of times. I wanted to talk about the student portal. This is going to be something that if you are an accepted and deposited student, you may have access to that student portal. If you have not applied or you haven't been accepted yet, it's possible that you will not have any access to this portal. So just so keep be aware that this exists. But depending on where you are in the process, you may not have access to the financial aid portal yet. But once you do, if you look down on that bottom right there, how do I log in? There's going to be an email that comes out to accepted students from our admissions team, which gives them directions on how to set up your user ID and your password with basically with our IT department, and have that all put into place. Once that's set up and you're in the system, you will have access to the MyFinAid portal, which is the student financial aid portal. So you direct yourself to myfinaid.mma.edu. You put in your credentials, your user ID and password, you click sign in, and you're in. Once you're in there, you can view your cost of attendance in real time, which is all of the costs that we sort of budget out for you depending on where you're from, what major you're interested in, some of those, some other factors there. It'll preload in all of your cost of attendance information, like I said, in real time, and it'll load in all of any financial aid you've been awarded. So if you've got a merit scholarship from our admissions team, that's going to be in there. If you've completed the FAFSA when it eventually opens, all of that federal aid will be in there once that gets set up. That'll, like I said, probably be closer to the end of January, but that will all be in there. It's also a really great resource for looking at, documents that you may or may not need to complete as we go through the process. There may be, we're going to talk about a couple things that we may need to document through the process in a later episode. But right off the bat, you can go in there. There's a permission of release form called the FERPA form, which is a family educational rights document that you can complete to give us permission to talk to a parent or guardian or anyone you want about your financial aid. So there are some rules about what I can and can't discuss with someone other than the student themselves. So if if a student is over the age of 18, then I'm kind of tied a little bit. I can't talk too much. I can talk in generalities, and I often do, but I can't talk specifics about a student's aid unless we do have a FERPA on file. So you can go in and complete that right on the MyFinAid website, and you'll have access, or I'll have access to be able to talk to whoever you've chosen, and you can list out multiple people, contact information, all that stuff. There's also the endowed scholarship application that's going to be on there. There are a few other fillable PDF documents that'll come into play, like I said, later. Once the FAFSA opens up, there's a few processes that, may come up. There are a few students that may have to complete additional documentation after the FAFSA has been completed. Like I said, I'll go into more detail about that when we talk about the FAFSA and we talk about some of the federal aid processes, but all of that is found right in that MyFinAid portal. So it winds up being a really great resource for students to kind of keep track of where they're at. You can go, if this isn't your first year, you can also go into different years. You can go back and see where you're at. It totals out all of the aid. So if you've been borrowing loans, for the last 3 years, you can go to the student aid portal and see exactly how much you've borrowed over time. You can see exactly how many scholarships you've gotten over the course of your education. So it's a really great resource, and there's a lot of stuff in there. And it's also where, as we get into, and like I said, I'll go into more detail on this when we get there. But when we get into some of the federal aid, there are some decisions that need to be made, and all of those decisions, whether or not you want to borrow federal loans, things like that, those decisions get made in that financial aid portal. So if you can, get access to it now, make sure that you know how to log in, navigate through it. There's not going to be a ton of information in there right now because, like I said, we don't have the FAFSA in there, but if you've got a merit scholarship, that'll be in there. And you can fill out that FERPA form. But get familiar with that because we'll be using it over your next 4 years here at Maine Maritime Academy. So I did want to do a quick review. This is kind of related to the financial aid portal because one of the things that you can see, like I talked about, is your cost of attendance. So you can look at that budget in your financial aid portal. I did a whole kind of breakout and deeper dive into cost of attendance in the last episode, but I just briefly wanted to go over it here. Some of this is review. If that wheel looks familiar, it's because I had it in the last episode. I basically had this exact slide in the last episode, but you can see that cost of attendance over there on the left. You've got your direct costs, you've got your indirect costs on that wheel. You're looking at things like tuition and fees, food and housing, some of those license fees, all the things that the school bills for that you would actually see on a bill when the bills come out in, basically, I think it's usually the beginning of July is when the fall bills first come out. Those are all called direct costs of attendance. And then there is an indirect cost category where we include additional things that the school doesn't bill for, but that we like to have students just be aware of and know that, I am probably going to need to buy books and supplies. And if I'm coming in as a freshman, I may need to get a new laptop. And if I'm coming from California, I may need to get a plane ticket. So when you log in to your student portal, your financial aid portal, it's going to break out all of those costs into like line item categories. So you're going to have your tuition. If you look over on the right there, that's kind of what it looks like on the portal. You're going to have tuition, fees, housing, food, insurance. It's going to have all of the indirect costs listed out. It's going to show you all of those dollar amounts based on some of the standard average data that we have available to us. So your average student, you know, from out of state who's in one of those unlimited license programs, it's going to have all of the costs for that, you know, cookie cutter type of student. So it's a good budgeting tool. It's not exact. We talked about this a little bit. It's not a bill. It's really, really designed to be a budgeting tool. So you're going to see medical insurance there on your student aid portal. But you may waive that. You may have your own insurance and you're potentially going to waive that insurance later. And it will never show up on your bill, but it's always going to be on that student aid portal because it's part of your cost of attendance, even if we're not billing you for it. So if you have more questions about that, feel free to reach out. Feel free to ask them in the chat. We did go into a lot more detail in that in the last episode, so feel free to check that one out if you have more questions. But the other thing that you're going to see on that page, where you can see all of your cost of attendance information on the student aid portal, is all of your aid. So right below all of your costs, they're going to show all of your aid. It's going to break it out by, you know, the type of aid, the source, where it came from. It's going to break it out by semester. So a lot of times, institutional aid, as well as a lot of other sources of aid, you know, you get awarded for the year, but because you're here in the fall, you're here in the spring, and you're billed in the fall and you're billed in the spring, a lot of those scholarships and loans and other types of aid are sort of split right down the middle in half between the two semesters. So when you look at your financial aid portal and you see all of those awards, you're going to be able to see exactly how those things are going to get split. And then it's a great opportunity for, you know, if you're looking and you're saying, you know what, actually, you know, maybe I wanted to get this loan, but I didn't want it split in half like this, or I want it split a little differently. That's sort of your opportunity to look and see if everything looks, you know, the way you were expecting it to look, and then we can have a continuing conversation about some of that stuff. But it's a great resource. I just wanted you guys to know that it's there, and that you know, it's a great starting point for getting a lot of information that we send out anyway. So you're going to get emails from me with all of this same information in it. But it's a good place to just go and be familiar with and get all of that information right off the bat. So this is the same slide it's been for the last 3 episodes. I did want to point out a specific name on here. So for additional resources, you can check out our financial aid website. You can also go to the admissions. Well, financial aid is sort of part of the admissions section of the website, but if you have questions about any of the admissions process, that's also a great, you know, great website or section of the website to sort of dig around in. And Zach's a great resource. The name I specifically wanted to mention is Casey Littlefield, all the way down at the bottom there under billing. I had mentioned when we were talking about some of those types of aid that you can get, and we were talking about the waivers and the discounts. Casey is our VA veterans certifying official on campus. So if you have questions about veteran benefits, you are a veteran, your parent or guardian is a veteran, and you have questions about how that process works or how that looks, Casey's a really great resource for that stuff. And she can be really helpful in sort of getting the ball rolling on that process. You feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Zach if you've got questions. He can direct you towards answers. I'm happy to answer questions or direct you towards resources if I can. Angela is also here in the financial aid office, so if you call me and I don't pick up, Angela's probably going to pick up for me. And she's a great resource as well, and knows all of the same things that I do. So you know, feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. You can get in touch with any of us. I did want to open it up to questions. Just quickly wanted to mention next episode, like I said, it's going to be on December 20th. We're going to be looking at the FAFSA. I'm going to try and give you guys like a step-by-step guide as best as I can, and sort of give you an idea of what to expect and what it's going to look like, and kind of you know, what the result of that FAFSA is going to be. I know that some questions came up in the chat, so I think we might jump on some of those. I didn't know if I'm going to give Zach the opportunity to talk now, because I've been talking for a while. If he's got
Yeah,
anything.
nicely done.
Yeah.
That was good. And thank goodness I finally have access to our Q&A. So I've been trying to jump on these guys as soon as they come in, and I appreciate everybody who does ask questions. As Ryan and I have said in each one of these episodes, without your engagement, we kind of run out of ideas and what things are important to people. So knowing what questions you guys have, it's really great for us to go ahead and turn around and put out more information about them. Hopefully I've done a good enough job of answering your questions. And if I haven't, keep on punching those in now and we'll get them answered live with Ryan. Though I do have one that I wanted to push out to you first, Ryan, and it came from Naomi. Are out-of-state residents out of state for all 4 years? So I assume that means, can you establish residency after you apply as a student?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, kind of gets determined initially by our admissions team, kind of in that whole application process. So Zach and his team are looking at student applications and determining your state of residency based on a couple, primary factors. Usually I think a lot of times it has to do with what high school you went to, and what town you claim as home, like where your actual physical residency is. In-state residency is a hard thing for out-of-state students. There are very, very specific guidelines for determining residency. And there are processes by which students may gain in-state residency, but I would say they are extremely rare. And that's usually because even if a student has maintained a residence in the state of Maine, and has received Maine residency from the state, they have to have, according to Maine maritime policy, as I understand it, and I could be wrong about this, but they have to have established residency in the state not for educational purposes. Meaning, if you start going to Maine Maritime Academy and then you get residency after that, you basically do not qualify for in-state tuition at Maine Maritime Academy. I mean, unfortunately, I don't want to like discourage people, but just to be completely upfront with you, it's very rare that a student who starts as an out-of-state student winds up getting in-state tuition after that first year. There are cases in which that happens. I will say that the rare situations that I can think of are, we had a student who had a split family. Mom lived in one state, dad lived in Maine. The student did not live primarily with dad, but through the whole process, they were able to establish residency through dad after the student had attended. So it does occasionally happen. I don't have anything to do with that process. So I'm happy to direct you towards resources for that. Like if you've applied and you've been determined to be an out-of-state resident, but you feel like you have a valid reason for claiming in-state tuition, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to direct you towards the people that would make those decisions. But it usually happens through our registrar's office. If there's an appeal that has to be made, it's going to go initially through our registrar's office, and Amy is our registrar, Amy Guto. She'll request a lot of documentation to help support your claim. She will review all of that documentation and make a judgment. And there are additional appeal processes after that if she determines that from her perspective you are not eligible for in-state tuition. But anyway, suffice to say, it's not a straightforward process, and I'm not the best person to talk about it specifically. I would love if I could give in-state tuition to every single student that came here. I would love if I could just do that with the wave of a pen. But unfortunately, I don't have that level of power. So I can direct you towards resources, but that's about the best I can do.
Great answer. So in like turn, I'm going to throw this one at you next because it kind of follows in the same vein. This was from an anonymous attendee. It says, I understand Mass Maritime has a $10,000 investment incentive or initiative program for out-of-state applicants. Does MMA provide a similar program?
No.
No, and Ryan, again, this has been.
I don't want to discourage you. I've talked to a couple families who are from Massachusetts even, who are looking at Maine Maritime Academy instead of, or as well as Mass Maritime Academy. So I am very familiar with how competitive the pricing at Mass Maritime Academy is. It's competitive, especially for a student from Mass, but it's even competitive for a student who's not from Massachusetts or Maine to go to Mass Maritime Academy, sorry, versus Maine Maritime Academy. They've got a much I would say they've got a healthier state funding program. So their state supports them in a way that is financially greater than we get supported by the state of Maine, and so that plays into some of their ability to do that. But they are just very, very competitive with their pricing for out-of-state students, and they do a really good job with that.
It's also a significantly larger institution, so they're able to cut out more of their top line to be able to kind of put everybody right in a median price range. We don't have that opportunity, as we're only about 900 undergraduate students on campus at any given time, so we have a very small class here.
That's true, and I don't want to like. I have heard from a lot of people who have had great experiences at Mass Maritime Academy, and they are really, really competitive with their pricing. So, if you get into Mass Maritime and you're trying to decide between the two of us, I take every student as an individual, and I try and be as competitive as I can be. So I can tell you that if you are considering SUNY, that's the Maritime Academy in New York, versus Maine Maritime Academy, and you're not from New York or Maine, I can be really competitive. I can do a pretty good job with that comparison.
But Ryan meant to say New York or Massachusetts. If you're from Maine, we can be competitive anyway because we can offer in-state tuition rates. But if you're from Massachusetts, we can't offer the regional rate because they have their own maritime academy. Is that what you meant?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that if you were considering, between SUNY and Maine Maritime Academy, we can usually be pretty competitive. If you're trying to choose between Maine Maritime Academy and Mass Maritime Academy, we definitely have some trouble being competitive there. But I will still do everything that I can. So if that's, something that you're looking at, and you've got offers from both us and from Mass, I have encouraged everyone that I've talked to send me the financial aid offer that they're sending you. I don't know if that's a normal thing to ask for or not, but it's the only thing I got. I can see what they're offering you. I can show my boss. He can show his boss, who's the president of the campus, and we can just let them know that, look, Mass is doing a really great job, and we're not meeting some of that competitive financial incentive, I guess. And that's really the only tool that I have. So if you've got the opportunity to send me that stuff, like I said, I will be as competitive as I can with the resources that I have, and I will do everything that I can for every student that I talk to. But if you feel like sending me that offer from Mass Maritime Academy, I would love to see it, just so that I can put it all together and show it to my boss and ask for more money.
I'll also say this, and again, this is not at all to badmouth Massachusetts Maritime Academy, but if you want to hear about more of the ways that we can be competitive beyond the financial pieces of it all, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you about the things that we offer here on campus. But the individual attention that you'll get from people like Ryan and his department, or myself, are going to be, bar none. There won't be anybody who can touch us on that personal customer service aspect of things. We are incredibly invested in that. Ryan and I both come from not only financial backgrounds, but also customer service backgrounds. We both come from a hospitality background. So that is in our bones. We want to be helpful, and we go out of our way to make sure that we do that as much as we can for every individual that we work with. And that goes for my entire department, his entire department, and the faculty and staff across campus. So we're happy to tell you what else we can offer beyond the financial incentive piece of it. This one is also from an anonymous attendee. I know you'll be talking in detail about FAFSA on December 20th. but I understand we should get FAFSA IDs before that. Do both students and parents fill out a FAFSA, and then do they somehow link?
That's a great question. Awesome question. That's a good, that's a good prep question. I really appreciate that, actually. I have not, I think I may have mentioned it in the last episode briefly, or maybe in the first episode briefly. Yes, you can go and get your FSA. It's the Federal Student Aid ID right now. So if you are a student who is going to be filling out the FAFSA and you've never filled out the FAFSA before, you are going to need an FSA ID. You can go to studentaid.gov and get that FSA ID right now, even though the FAFSA isn't open. Only one parent is going to have to complete the parent portion of the FAFSA. There isn't the way this question is worded. I'm thinking maybe the parent thinks that the student fills out a FAFSA and the parent fills out a FAFSA, and then they kind of get linked together. That's not how it works. There is one FAFSA for the student, and at a certain point, they're going to ask for additional contributors on that FAFSA. And that's usually where the parent or guardian is filling in their information. But only one parent needs to fill in their information. So only one parent, usually it's, it could be if you're like nuclear family, you got mom and dad, and mom and dad, are trying to decide who needs to fill out the FAFSA. It can be either of you. If you're not in that kind of quote unquote nuclear family, split family, trying to figure out who needs to fill it out, you may not, one of you will likely not need an FSA ID. Determining which one of you will need an FSA ID is usually done during the student's portion of that FAFSA application process. So, it doesn't hurt to have an FSA ID. So if both parents want to go and do that, or other guardians want to go and do that, if they think they're going to be contributing any information on the FAFSA for the student, feel free to go get an FSA ID right now. But you can also wait until that FAFSA opens up to determine if you've got questions about who needs it and who doesn't. The student definitely does. So the student who's attending school definitely needs an FSA ID, and typically just one parent or guardian or other type of contributor is going to need an FSA ID as well to complete their portion of the FAFSA. So that's how that works.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Great
so
question.
I'm actually gonna answer 1/2 here from Naomi, and it looks like Bryce at the same time. If that's all right with you, Ryan.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Naomi asks, is there a range for merit scholarships, GPAs? I'm gonna kind of work through that one. And then also Bryce asks, if I received a merit scholarship at admission, is that the final merit scholarship opportunity or amount?
Zach, that's a great question.
Yes. So let me work through this in two parts. Yes, there is a range for merit based on GPA ranges. So 4.0 and above students will receive the highest level of merit, no matter what the program is. We will always award those that are the hardest working and who have prepared themselves the best for their college experience. So it literally pays to do well as a student, literally. So if you're a junior watching this, start crushing the books now, and don't let the senior slack hit you, because to answer Bryce's question, it is my understanding, Ryan, please correct me if I'm wrong, that if they submit their final senior year grades and you reach a different tier of eligibility in our merit range, you are now eligible for a larger scholarship. So please continue to work hard all the way through your senior year, because if you can raise your GPA into our next tiered amount, you are then awarded the higher amount of the two. So the tier ranges that we're looking at,
399, and you wind up at the end with a 4.0, you reach back out because you can get more money.
Correct. So there is definitely reason to continue working hard. I know a lot of us, myself included, in my senior year, second semester hit, and I was like, I'm checked out mentally, and I wish I hadn't done that. So please, for your sake, it literally pays you to continue working hard. So please, please, please send us your GPA updates as you get them. The ranges kind of vary, but it's 4.0 and above, 3.99 to 3.75 gets that next tier, and then so on and so forth. The largest band is right in the middle. That's believe what 3.74 to 3.33 in that beltway, and then it kind of tiers down from there. So we will, yes.
I just wanted to say, my goal is always to get people out of here with the most money as possible. So Also, Bryce, if you wind up at the end of the year and your GPA is lower than it was when you got your initial award, don't say anything to the admissions team about that.
That's a good piece of advice. That is a good piece of advice. But you will have to maintain a certain GPA once you arrive to maintain your eligibility to continue receiving your merit-based scholarship. And then to jump into Kelly's question here, what is the maximum amount of any of the scholarships, merit or endowed? I'll throw out there that the maximum amount of merit is based on your program and your in-state or out-of-state tuition rate. So the largest would be for an out-of-state regimental-based major. It's $8,000 a year, and that would include the 5-year program. So you would get that extra year of support. That's $4,000 per semester is the highest level of merit offering that we give out through that specific program. But again, what is it? What's the eligibility requirement now, Ryan? 3.0?
To maintain. So
To maintain.
you can get it.
Yep.
You can get it. Here's the thing. You can get it with a 2.8 high school GPA. You can get some merit scholarships. To maintain your merit scholarships here at Maine Maritime Academy, you do have to maintain a 3.0 after your first year. So you get through the year, you got a 3.0, you keep it. You get through the year, you've got a 2.5. You're not going to keep your merit scholarships, unfortunately. So there's a little incentive to try and do well and perform well here at the school in the form of those merit scholarships.
Remember, it pays to do well.
Yeah.
All right. And then Ryan, do you want to talk about endowments on Kelly's question there?
Yeah. So that's a tough one as far as like maximum amount. I'm going to say that I'll give you an average amount. I'll tell you for this current year, 23-24, the average amount of endowed scholarships that a student could expect to receive for a year was 3,000. We were awarding up to about 5,000 or 6,000 to students, depending on a lot of those same factors, state of residency, the academic major, financial need, and a couple other factors that go into that. So we did have some students who certainly came in above that $3,000 average, and we did have students who came in below that. So we had some students who only were eligible for $1,000 or $2,000 in endowed scholarships for the year, but the average was just about 3,000 for the year.
So there you go. You combine up your 3,000 on average student endowed scholarship, plus if you're hitting that highest range of regimental major from out of state, $8,000, you now suddenly have $11,000 discounted off your price before you even arrive. And then we can look at additional private scholarship opportunities with you. We can look at loan programs. There's other incentives there as well. So we can work on that number pretty successfully. And as formally part of Ryan's team, I can tell you that we do work hard in that department to make everybody's bill as comfortable as we can make it. Though we can't solve the problems, but we'll do our very best.
Yeah. So these are all really great questions. I want to thank you guys so much for asking all of these great questions. We do have a little bit more time. We won't have a hard stop at 8, but we've got a few more minutes till we get there. So do you want to jump into more questions, Zach?
Sure. Let's see. So we have one here from Sean. For the endowed scholarship form, is there a word limit on the first page question and thank you letter? If you continue to type on the first page question, the text just gets smaller and smaller, but it appears that you can type as much as you want.
Yeah, you can technically type as much as you want. That's okay. I don't mind. You don't need to type a whole lot, honestly. There is a section on the first page of the application to write, why you're interested in Maine Maritime Academy, what you want to do here, what you want to do with your life. It does not have to be super in-depth and long. It's kind of just a little information. The whole point of the form is to really just gauge interest. If you have enough time to complete the endowed scholarship application, I have enough time to consider you for endowed scholarships. That's how I look into it. But that first section, the information that you're putting on your application, it's just information that I can provide to a scholarship donor if you get selected for that scholarship. So the thank you letter, if you would like to write a really long thank you letter, our donors love that. If you want to write something short and sweet, our donors also love that. They just like, they like thank yous. So the second page, the release form, is what gives us the permission to share that information with our scholarship donors. So the thank you letter, yeah, it can be whatever you want it to be, honestly. If you want to write a couple sentences and say, hey, thanks for the money, that's okay too. I would not encourage you to do that, but you can certainly do that if you choose. And
I'll
as
go out
much as
on,
you want to write, go for it.
so I'll go on a limb here and throw out a piece of personal information. My grandmother and grandfather have been a donor to this school for a very long time. The Robert F. Russell and Doris May McIntosh Russell endowed scholarship is my grandparents. And I know my grandmother is 97 years old. She still reads every single one of those thank you letters, and they mean a lot to her. So by all means, write something that's meaningful, because yes, it's a generic letter, but it could be somebody's 97-year-old grandmother that sits in their kitchen and reads those and thinks about the pride that she has in the students that go to this place and receive that money. So it really does matter. So thank you for the question. And my response would be put some thought into your response and write as much as you think is necessary to say thank you the way that you want to. All right. Well, going back here, looks like we have another anonymous question. Do I need to complete the FAFSA to be eligible for aid? I know that some schools you are eligible without having completed FAFSA, but I'm not sure if that's the case everywhere. We were just talking about this before we started.
What?
We were talking about this before we started, that you don't technically have to fill out the FAFSA to be eligible for aid. You can be eligible without filling out the FAFSA, but we can actually apply any aid to your account. Sorry, Ryan, you take it away.
If you have been awarded a merit scholarship by our admissions team, and you show up in the fall of 24 as a freshman, and you have not done the FAFSA, you still get to have that merit scholarship. You will not be considered for any other aid from the school in that freshman year until you have completed the FAFSA and the endowed scholarship application. When you get into your sophomore year, if you have not done your FAFSA your sophomore year, you will not continue to receive that merit scholarship. And any other aid that you were eligible for, scholarships and stuff from the institution that you were eligible for in your first year. If you do not complete your FAFSA in your second year, you will not continue to receive any of that aid. So the idea is it's an incentive to complete the FAFSA and see what aid you may or may not be eligible for from the federal government. And collecting that information and collecting that data is sort of a relatively simple, I'll say simple, it's not entirely easy or straightforward, but it's a pretty low barrier to entry for institutional aid. Now, to answer your question even more technically, anybody is really eligible for aid, because aid encompasses a lot of things. So if you are talking about being eligible for private loans, you do not need to do the FAFSA in order to be eligible for private loans. So we do have students who attend here who don't receive scholarships. They don't really go out and look for private scholarships. They haven't gotten scholarships through the school, and they borrow privately every year. And those students don't need to do FAFSA if they don't want to. I do not encourage you to do that. I would love it if you did the FAFSA, completed the endowed scholarship application, kept a 3.0 GPA, and I was able to give you all of the money every year that I can possibly give you. That's my ideal. But if you want to not do the FAFSA and just borrow privately for the next 4 years, go for it. That's fine too.
There you go. So great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to jump back on some more merit award questions here. Sean asks, for GPAs, are you talking about weighted or unweighted? We always look at the weighted GPA. Typically, they are always higher. And again, we want to award you the most that we can. And if you've gone out of your way to take higher weighted courses, honors courses, AP courses, AB courses, if they've been offered dual enrollment courses, we want to make sure that you get credit for doing the harder work. So yes, we always look at the weighted GPA. And we'll do a conversion. If you're on a 5.0 scale, we look at a 4.0 scale. So if you're on a 5.0 or a 4.5, I know Florida's residents, I think, are on a 5.0, and then their state is on a different level than the schools or the district. So it's really challenging. Depends on the student, but we do the conversion in-house to put it back on a 4.0 scale. We'll always do it based on the weighted GPA. And if you have college, speaking of dual enrollment, if you do have a dual enrollment course or college credit that you want to bring on, please make sure you also submit an official transcript from the accredited university or college that you are sending us that information from, to get credit. We can look at the GPA without the transcript because it'll be on your high school transcript if it's a dual enrollment course, but let us know if you do want the credit, or if you've taken an AP course, we need the AP exam test scores. All those things matter, okay? But good question, thank you. Let's see. Mary asks, are SAT scores considered when awarding merits? No, we are a test optional school, so you don't even have to take the SATs to come to MMA. To level that playing field when we're looking at merit, we definitely don't want to consider those aspects that we don't require of all students. So we look at high school GPA flatly when we're looking at or incoming GPA. We'll also look at transfer students coming in sometimes. So we'll look at that college GPA. So it's always based on GPA for merit awards. But again, great question. Thank you for asking. Let's see. Bryce talking about the top dollar amount is. So if you're going back to the top dollar amount for merit scholarships, like I mentioned, the top dollar amount is for out-of-state regimental students. It's $8,000 a year, or $4,000 a semester. And the lowest award, I believe, is $1,000 a year. That's for in-state non-regimental majors. And the lowest AP or lowest GPA range for us. And that would be what, $500 a semester for all 4 years. And those do tail as long as you maintain that 3.0 GPA, like Ryan mentioned, and fill out your FAFSA form after your first year. Nice. Yeah. So slip that back in there. And then if you're in a program with a volunteer regiment, can you get extra merit? No. Again, the merit is only based on GPA. We don't offer, I don't believe we offer additional financial incentive by being volunteer regiment, but there are endowments that are specific to regimental students. And I believe that they would be considered for those scholarship opportunities if they are in the regiment, period, bar none. There are some that are program based, but there are some that are regimental status based within the endowment programs. Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We've got endowments that only require regimental status for to be awarded those scholarships. You don't have to be in one of those unlimited license majors. Zach, if you can speak just real quickly though, if a student is in a non-licensed major and they opt into the regiment,
correct,
they are not awarded the
regimental, yes, because it's based on program at that point. So the eligibility,
right? So
yeah, is based on GPA and then the academic program.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I just wanted to clarify.
Residency is the other piece. So we look at those three components. It's your incoming GPA, your state of residency, and their academic program. So we look at the program, not the regimental status specifically. Yeah. Because if you're in the regiment, but you're not in a licensed track, you're still paying a lower tuition or a lower cost of attendance than you would be if you go in the licensed track. The licensed programs cost on average about $10,000 more per year. So we offer a larger merit award to help offset the cost of those programs a little bit, as much as that we're able to. Anyway, you know, kind of going back to that mass maritime question, we do look at some of those aspects to try to offset in as best we can. So hopefully that answers your question. You've had many questions. Thank you, Bryce.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. Thank you for all of your questions. If you've got any last minute ones, feel free to throw them in there. We're happy to answer them. We have hit the 8 o'clock mark, so thank you all so much for being here and participating and asking questions. I truly love doing these webinars and talking to people and nerding out about financial aid stuff and answering questions about it. And it seems like Zach also enjoys being here and doing these with me. So thank you to Zach and thank you to everyone who attended and to everybody who asked questions. We really, really appreciate the involvement, and we appreciate that you are taking this seriously and being proactive. Good job.
I will second that. I I love this place. I love Maine Maritime. It's in my blood. It's in my bones. I grew up around this campus. I've had a lot of family that's worked. I'm a third generation employee through this place, believe it or not. So I'm really proud of the students that we get to work with, and I love working with each and every one of you folks as we come through the application process, which means that this is like the most exciting part of my year. Between now and March is really when I get to have a lot of fun meeting you guys and answering questions like these. So love these webinars, Ryan and I, as long as there are questions being asked and y'all end up coming in and sitting in. We had a great number of attendees tonight, so appreciate that. We'll continue to do them if you find them valuable. So we love your feedback. We love the questions. We appreciate it all. Thank you guys. I know that you're all sending in your thank yous now, but really it's thank you from us. So we appreciate it. And again, if you need anything, Ryan, when you go back one, our contact information is here. Please reach out to us individually. We're happy to connect with any of you all. Go one more. Go one more. There you go. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a happy holiday season. Stay safe and warm. And we'll see you again in December. All right. Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
so much. Good
Have a
night.
lovely night. Bye-bye.